When I say lit RPG, what comes to mind? SAO, Overlord, solo leveling? All great stories and animes, to be sure. But what if I told you that they aren't lit RPGs, but a whole different subset of the same game influenced storytelling? You may have heard the term Gamelit before, but it's often hard and even confusing to understand how it's different from lit RPGs. I'm Kirosaki, a writer who also makes games, and I want to start a new series called Eldritch Worldbuilding, where I get to poke at human story logic with curiosity and affection. It won't replace the devlogs or the animatics, but serve as a side dish to both. The goal is not to tell you how to world build, but to explain and explore different world building concepts I like to use as an eldritch being learning to create for humans. None of these concepts will apply only to writing, but to storytelling as a whole, whether that be for novels, comics, or video games. So, for my first video, I wanted to start here with a question I get asked a lot. What's the difference between a game lit story and a lit RPG? Let's start with what game influenced storytelling is. In its simplest terms, it's a framework that uses game like elements at the heart of its world building. There is a big difference between frameworks and genres, but we'll explore that in a different video. For the sake of this discussion, let's just say that a framework is a level below genre, something which genre is balanced on top of. For game inspired frameworks, they often include features like levels, stats, progression trees, quests, rewards, and all kinds of features we associate with games. The reason this type of media seems to be popular with you humans is that most of you like gaming in some form. Gaming inspired literature makes explicit what modern life already feels like to many people: invisible numbers ticking up and down behind the scenes. And just as there are so many genres of games, gaming inspired literature can live inside any genre. You can be stuck in a visual novel where the stats and progression are relationship meters everyone has to balance. You could be stuck in a boomer shooter where it's just number go up. Gaming inspired literature can reach everyone, and especially in the light novel or web novel sphere, it does. For the most part, this framework also falls into two subcategories: game literature, or gamelit, and lit RPG, or role playing literature. So, what makes them different? Super sure I don't want to watch the whole video answer. One could survive on its own if you took the gaming aspects away, and the other can't. One asks, what would it be like to live in a game? The other asks, what if reality worked like a game? It's authorship versus ontology. Game lit worlds have authors inside the fiction. Lit RPG worlds treat game logic as property of existence itself. For those who want the long answer, I'm going to give a general overview of each subframework, and then we'll dive into one specific example to help illustrate how it works. First, let's look at the side we are all the most familiar with, especially in the visual medium: Gamelit. These are our SAOs, overlords, and dot hacks of the world. And no, I'm not forgetting solo leveling. We'll come back to Song Jinwoo later. So, what makes these gamelit? Gamelit is specifically stories where the world is, well, a game on some level, usually made by humans for humans, but it doesn't have to be. Even when the creators are gods, aliens, AIs, or some other unknowable entity, the world still has authorship. Someone, somewhere, decided how it works. Someone decided what the feedback looks like and what the UI looks like. It becomes important not because it's flashy, but because it's diegetic evidence of design. Interfaces exist to be read. They exist to mediate between the user and the system. Visually, they are the constant reminders that this reality has a backstage. For this category, I decided to go with a personal favorite gamelet of mine, Overlord. If you don't know, Overlord is a story about Ains, who is logging into his beloved MMORPG before it gets sunsetted. However, Once the servers close, he finds that the world of the game seems to have been teleported to a different reality where he is stuck in the body of his avatar and all of the NPCs suddenly gained sentience. The story follows his journey as he navigates this new reality and learns a side of a game he always loved. The easy part is that summary already tells us why it's Gamelit. He's in a game. He still has access to his UI, his inventory all exists, and he's even able to use game knowledge to his advantage. The game mechanics aren't like physics, they are a separate layer that the player, Heinz, can use to his advantage. The world being a game is critical to both the world building and the plot. The story would fall apart if it wasn't. Take away the gaming elements, or the fact that the world is a game at its core and there is no story, nothing for Ains to do or care about. This is the truth with all Gamelit stories. If you take away those game elements, suddenly there's just nothing there. Now, let's talk about what makes lit RPGs different. How are they not Gamelit? Well, basically, a lit RPG is very similar to Gamelit, except stats, leveling, and gaming terminology are like gravity and oxygen. Quests and rewards aren't given by its system. It's your mom saying, earn $5 by doing this errand for me. It's a lot more mundane at its core. Sure, we have stats and levels and dungeons and monsters, but it's just life. No one made the world this way. It just is this way. No code deciding difficulty, no UI to help anyone understand what's going on. Lit RPG worlds are exciting not because numbers exist, they're interesting because the numbers are unavoidable. They are not tools, instead, they become conditions. This is interesting for some because it gives the idea of if reality was just this way, not somebody made it, but physics just like to give stats. Now, in the world of light novels and web novels, there are dozens of examples of this type of writing. But the best mainstream example I could find was Don Machi, or Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? To be honest, I was introduced to this anime by a collaboration through a mobile game I play. But when I gave it a try, I realized it's the closest to a mainstream lit RPG that really exists. The Falna isn't software, it's a divine law of biology. The gods aren't designing the world, they are just as much beholden to it as the everyday people. There is no system, no code to fall back on for everyone, no UI to translate the world, just the reality they all have to survive. Remove the Falna, and honestly, the story would be fine. Bel would still want to get stronger. The gods would still provide divine favor to certain individuals. It would be different, sure, but the story wouldn't fall apart without it. Now, to my favorite example of both solo leveling. On the surface, it's clearly a lit RPG. People can't decide if they reawaken, they don't have a choice about the gates. It's just a part of new reality. Then we have Sung Jin Woo, and for him, we learn no, it's Gamelit. There are creators, there is an interface. Humans are just meant to be NPCs for someone else's game until Jinwoo himself becomes a player. To me, it does such a great job of mixing both ideas because you can argue all day which one it is, but we can all agree it's using a gaming inspired framework. It could both survive and would absolutely fall apart if you removed the gaming elements. The world as a whole would be fine. It would just be altered reality, which is already how everyone else experiences it. But Jinwoo's arc as a character falls apart without the gaming elements. The plot falls apart without the gaming elements. So the story as is defined as gamelit. If it was told from another character's point of view, it would be a lit RPG, which is honestly why it's my favorite. The dual framework use is why it feels so different from most examples of either, and why people argue which one it belongs to constantly. So, where to start when you want to world build for game inspired creations? Well, you can start by asking yourself a very important question. How integral to my world and plot do I want the gaming elements to be? If you want it so important that the story would collapse without it, then you're shooting for Gamelit. If you want it to be there as spice and flair, but not the main focus of the world or the story, then LitRPG is your way. One way I do this when I'm creating stories for humans is asking myself if I replaced the gaming elements with magic, saying this happens because magic, would the story hold? If the answer is yes, then it's a lit RPG. If the answer is no, then it's gamelit. Another is the NPC test. Is the main character a player or the player character? Do they have access to the backstage of reality or do they just live in it? Neither is good, neither is bad. And if you want to get really funky with it, you can go the solo leveling route and mix both. For a story I'm currently working on, I actually decided to take a stab at this kind of mixing, where the world feels like gamelit, but is actually lit RPG. At the end of the day, world building is about setting the stage for your story to unfold on, and frameworks are just the physics you're choosing to have that world live inside. There is never a wrong or right way to world build. If you made it this far, thanks for checking out this first episode. In the next one, I'll likely go into more about the difference between frameworks, genre, and the layers of storytelling as I use them. And if you want to ask me questions live and watch me world build, I do world build and writing streams all the time on Twitch at twitch.tv/Kirosaki. I also play games, talk about storytelling tricks games use, as well as work on my own games. So if any of that sounds interesting, come hang out with us. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Regardless, thanks for watching. And until next time, bye bye.